This happened a little over a year ago. I'm Jess, 32, and I usually go camping alone when I need to clear my head. I work as an environmental scientist and spend a lot of time in the city, so I love getting back to nature. It was one of those weekends when I thought I could just unwind in the woods, but it turned out to be anything but relaxing. I've never stopped thinking about it. I set up my tent in a remote area surrounded by tall pines. The air smelled like damp soil, and the sounds of rustling leaves were calming at first. I roasted some marshmallows and felt the peace of nature wrap around me. But once night fell, everything changed. Around midnight, I woke up suddenly. I heard a sound outside my tent branches snapping. I thought maybe it was a deer or something harmless. But then I heard whispers. They were soft and almost melodic but totally unintelligible. The hairs on my neck stood up. My heart raced. I didn't want to poke my head out, but the whispers made me uneasy. The next day, I decided to take a hike to shake off my nerves. I walked deeper into the woods and stumbled upon strange symbols carved into the trees. They looked old, maybe ancient. I didn't recognize any of the shapes. A chill ran down my spine. I wanted to take a picture, but something told me to leave them alone. My gut said not to disturb whatever they meant. That night, as I lay in my tent, the whispers returned. They were louder, filling the air urgently. I thought I saw flickering lights in the distance, moving in a way that made no sense. Maybe it was fireflies or some trick of the light, but I had to check it out. Against my better judgment, I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out. My heart pounded as I walked toward the lights. They led me to a clearing I hadn't seen before. There, I found remnants of a campsite, old, discarded items scattered around, all covered in dirt and leaves. I should have turned back, but I felt drawn there, like I was invited or warned. Then, the feeling of being watched hit me hard. I spun around, but I didn't see anyone. I took a deep breath and called out, "Is anyone there?" Nothing. Just the rustle of the leaves. My flashlight flickered. I looked back at the clearing, and those whispers returned. They surrounded me, but I couldn't see where they came from. I stood frozen. Then in a voice I barely recognized, I whispered, "Who is there?" Just as I said that, I felt a cold draft sweep past me, like the woods answered in some way. It felt wrong, but all I could do was stand there, shivering in the dark. I never went back to that spot again. I couldn't shake the feeling of those eyes watching me, or the haunting whispers that echo in my head. After that trip, I never camped alone again. I can't explain what happened out there, but it still haunts me every night. I spent the next few months avoiding solo trips into the woods. Every time I thought about it, my stomach twisted in knots. I told myself I was just being silly, but I couldn't shake the memories. The whispers, the feeling of being watched, those things lingered in the back of my mind. Eventually, I decided it was time to confront my fears. I invited a couple of friends to camp with me. I thought maybe the presence of others would ease my anxiety and help me face whatever was out there. We chose a different site, still surrounded by trees but much farther from where I had camped alone. On the first night, everything felt fine. We set up our tents and lit a fire. Laughter echoed through the clearing as we roasted hot dogs and told stories. I felt safe, comforted by the presence of my friends. As the night wore on, I started to relax. Maybe this was all behind me, I thought. But just after midnight, that familiar feeling crept back in. I heard the whispers. This time they weren't just in my head. I would occasionally catch my friends glancing around, as if they felt it too. I resisted the urge to say anything, I didn't want to ruin the night for them. Then I noticed something. One of my friends, Sarah, kept looking toward the trees. I followed her gaze, but there was nothing unusual there. It was just darkness. She leaned in closer and whispered, "Do you guys hear that?" My heart sank. I opened my mouth to voice my own suspicions, but I was cut off by a faint rustling nearby. I wanted to dismiss it as an animal, but there was no way to ignore the cold anxiety creeping up my spine. Maybe it's just the wind. I tried to suggest, trying to sound more certain than I felt. My friends nodded, but I could see the worry on their faces. Suddenly, a twig snapped. We all jumped at the noise, and Sarah shot up to her feet. What was that? She gasped. Her eyes darted in the direction of the sound. Probably just a deer, I said, my voice trembling more than I intended. But the last time I saw deer, they didn't make that kind of noise. Let us just stay together, I added, hoping to keep everyone calm. We huddled close to the fire, found comfort in our shared presence. But the atmosphere had shifted. The laughter from earlier faded, replaced by an eerie stillness. My heart raced as I listened. The whispers had returned, layered with something else like a low murmur, almost like soft chanting. Out of nowhere, a shadow darted past the edge of the firelight. I almost didn't see it, but it was there, real, undeniable. My stomach dropped. Did you see that? I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. My friends glanced at each other, panic written on their faces. That's when I felt it, a palpable pressure, as if the forest itself was closing in around us. I wanted to scream or run, but the fear pinned me in place. Let us go check it out, Sarah said suddenly, her voice surprisingly steady. I could only stare at her, horrified. Let us see what's out there. Before I could argue, she moved toward the darkness. I hesitated, my instincts screaming at me to stay put. But something compelled me to follow. Something unresolved inside me yearned for understanding. That was the moment everything began to go wrong. The moment Sarah stepped into the shadows, I shivered. The darkness seemed to expand, swallowing the light from the fire. I glanced back at my other friend, Mark, who looked just as bewildered as I felt. Without saying a word, we both followed Sarah, though every step felt like a mistake. The murmurs intensified, swirling around us like a thick fog. I strained to catch a word, a sound that made sense, but they remained elusive, a language I couldn't grasp. Sarah was moving quickly, almost eagerly, her silhouette a blur against the dark trees. I could feel Mark's unease beside me as he whispered, "Are you sure about this?" "No," I admitted, but we pressed on. It felt as if the woods were alive, each branch creaking and bending as if warning us to turn back. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, scrutinized by unseen eyes. "Sarah!" I called out, but my voice barely reached her. She was too far ahead. I quickened my pace, desperate to catch up, but the ground was uneven and the thick underbrush snagged at my feet. I strained to see her, hoping she would turn around, but she didn't. Mark and I managed to catch up to her just as she came to a small clearing. In the center stood an old, twisted tree, its gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal hands. I felt a chill run through me as I took in the sight. Something was off about this tree, as if it had witnessed countless secrets in its lifetime. "What is this place?" Mark asked, stepping cautiously beside me. "I don't know," I replied, my eyes darting to the darkness. I could still hear the whispers, now layered with a faint, eerie laughter. The sound seemed almost mocking. Then I saw it, a flash of white in the bark of the tree. When I stepped closer, I realized it wasn't just a trick of the moonlight. Something was carved into the tree, symbols swirling together, reminiscent of something I couldn't quite remember. I reached out to touch it, but Sarah's voice stopped me. "Don't!" she cried out, her eyes wide with alarm. "We shouldn't disturb it." "What are you talking about?" I snapped. Anger surged through me, but deep down, fear throbbed stronger. "It's just a tree, Sarah. We came out here to find out what's going on." Just then, a low growl echoed across the clearing. The sound sent a jolt of terror through me. I froze, my heart racing as I watched the dark shapes shift. A mass of shadows emerged from the trees, coalescing into the form of a large animal. For a moment, all I could do was stare, paralyzed by dread. It wasn't like any animal I'd ever seen, distorted and unnatural in the dim light. Someone gasped. Was it me or Mark? I couldn't tell. That's when the growl morphed into a chilling laugh. "Run!" I shouted, as adrenaline surged through me. Without waiting for my friends, I turned and sprinted back toward the camp. The thudding of my heart drowned out everything else, but I could feel the presence behind me, chasing. I glanced over my shoulder, but all I could see was the darkness closing in. Did Sarah and Mark follow? I had no idea. I just needed to get away from whatever was lurking in those woods. As I burst back into the clearing, I grabbed the flashlight from my bag, aiming its beam into the trees. The light flickered, casting long shadows along the ground. My breath came in panicked gasps as I called out for my friends again. But all I heard was that haunting laughter again, echoing through the woods. Then everything went dark. I jolted awake, my heart beating wildly in my chest. The darkness that surrounded me was thick, pressing against my skin, but the laughter was gone. It felt surreal, as if I had been pulled from a nightmare only to realize the real terror hadn't left me. I fumbled for my flashlight, barely remembering where I'd dropped it. The cold ground was damp beneath my hands. "Mark? Sarah?" I called out, my voice barely louder than a whisper. No answer. Panic threatened to overwhelm me again as I desperately swung the beam of my flashlight in wide circles. All I could see were trees, their outlines swirling like shadowy figures. As I stood there, frozen in fear, I recalled the grotesque creature. What was it? I could still hear its laugh echoing in my mind. The memory intertwined with the unsettling whispers I had heard earlier, deepening the unease in my gut. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself to stand. "I have to find them," I said aloud, trying to shake off the dread creeping over me. I took a step forward, then another, the beam of light flickering erratically. I was aware of every crackle of twigs beneath my feet, terrified my movements would draw unwanted attention. After a few moments, I stumbled into the small clearing where we had first found the twisted tree. My flashlight illuminated its trunk, the carved symbols that had once entranced me now appeared sinister in the glow. I hesitated, my hand hovering above the carving. Was it moving? Maybe it was just the light playing tricks on me. Suddenly, a rustling from the brush nearby snapped my focus. My muscles tensed, and I aimed my flashlight in that direction, dread pooling in my stomach. The beam landed on a figure, emerging slowly from behind a tree. My heart sank. "Sarah?" I called, gripping the flashlight tightly. A familiar silhouette stepped into the light. It was Sarah, but her eyes were wide and glazed, as if she were in a trance. "You shouldn't have come back," she said softly, her voice almost distant. "What are you talking about? Where's Mark?" I asked, stepping closer. She didn't respond, just stared at me, and for a moment, I was frightened by the emptiness in her gaze. "Don't disturb it," she murmured, her fingers pointing at the tree behind me. My instinct screamed at me to run again, but I held my ground. "Did you see that thing?" I asked, searching her face for any sign of recognition. But all she did was nod slowly, like she was waking from a deep sleep, drawing in shuddering breaths as she looked around. The laughter from before floated back into my mind, now mixing with the rustling sounds from the surrounding trees. I looked back at the tree and noticed something new. Symbols in the bark appeared to shift, almost as if they were trying to form a message, something urgent. "What is happening?" I whispered, suddenly feeling an overwhelming urge to leave this place. I turned to Sarah, wanting her to follow me, but the uncertainty in her eyes gripped me with fear. "Not yet," she replied, her voice low and eerie, "it's not done with us." At that moment, a low growl reverberated through the clearing again, sending chills down my spine. This time, it was closer, hungry. That's when I saw it again, the shadowy figure from before, now lurking just beyond the reach of the flashlight's beam. My breath caught in my throat as I realized we were no longer alone. The woods felt alive, and they were waiting. I took a step back, my heart racing as the shadow drew closer, clawed hands gripping the moist earth. Its form shifted between the trees, too fast for my eyes to fully comprehend. I could only see flashes of dark fur and unsettling yellow eyes, glowing with a malevolent hunger. "Sarah," I said, my voice trembling. I needed her to focus, to snap out of whatever trance held her. "We have to go. Now." But she didn't move. Instead, she turned her gaze back toward the twisted tree. "It wants us to stay," she whispered, almost dreamily. I felt sick. "No. We can't do that. We need to find Mark," I yelled, desperate. But the forest consumed my words, absorbing them into the thick darkness. Suddenly, the growl escalated, followed by a series of jagged breaths that seemed to surround us. I swung the flashlight in circles, praying to catch a glimpse of whatever horror stalked us, but everything remained hidden in the shadows. "Sarah, please," I pleaded again. I stepped closer, desperate to shake her instinct to stand still. The creature had to be just behind the tree, waiting for me or for both of us. Without thinking, I grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the path we had come from. I felt her resistance, as if the ground held her back. "We can't let it keep us here," I shouted, fear bubbling into frustration. She blinked rapidly, as if waking from a dream. The distant look in her eyes evaporated, leaving confusion in its wake. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice shaky. "Running," I insisted. Together, we moved, stumbling past the creepy tree and plunging into the thick underbrush, dodging branches that clawed at our clothes. But the growling intensified, echoing through the hollow darkness around us. I led Sarah with urgency, panic fueling my every step. "Mark!" I yelled as we moved, hoping beyond hope he was safe somewhere in these woods. Suddenly, the ground beneath us quaked, as if the very earth revolted against our escape. A deafening roar, unlike anything I had ever heard, split the air. I felt it deep in my chest, paralyzing my breath. In that instant, I turned and saw it. The creature was fully visible now, towering above us with elongated limbs and a grotesque, twisted face. Its smile was wide, revealing rows of sharp teeth glistening in the flashlight's beam. "Run!" I screamed. Sarah finally broke from her shock, and we bolted together through the trees, debris flying behind us as the creature surged forward. Each breath was labored, and I could feel it chasing us, its breath hot against our backs. We stumbled through the darkness, desperately trying to find our way back. I didn't want to risk looking back, but I could hear the thudding footsteps drawing closer. My heart pounded in my ears as we burst into another clearing. "Where now?" Sarah gasped, eyes wide with terror. I glanced around, frantically searching for anything that could save us. That's when I noticed the glowing symbols on the ground beneath the trees. They pulsed with that same eerie light from the tree. I realized they weren't writing, they were a map, a warning. And the very ground was shifting. In the midst of our flight, the earth beneath me cracked open, and a dark chasm appeared, yawning wide. A horrible realization churned in my gut: it would claim us, just like it had claimed Mark. "Sarah, jump!" I yelled, grabbing her wrist and pulling her toward the edge. If we didn't escape, we'd be swallowed by the very thing that haunted these woods. But just as we leaped, a massive shadow blocked our escape, and everything went black. When I came to, everything was eerily quiet. The darkness weighed heavily around us, but I could faintly feel Sarah beside me, her breath shaky, alive. Panic surged through me again, and I propped myself up on my elbows. "Sarah?" I called, my voice breaking the suffocating silence. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I think so," she replied. I heard the rustle of leaves as she shifted. "What happened?" I blinked, struggling to gather my thoughts. The creature had been right behind us. Had it caught us? I don't know. We must be jumped into some kind of hole, or did we fall? As I pushed myself up completely, I realized we were no longer in the clearing. Instead, we were surrounded by thick blackness, interspersed with strange, luminescent plants that illuminated our surroundings in a ghostly glow. I could see now that we weren't alone. Shapes flickered just beyond our reach, moving silently between the trees. "Where are we?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. There was fear in her tone that shot through me. "I'm not sure, but we should move," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "We need to find a way out." Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the trees, reminding me of the creature that had chased us. My stomach knotted as I scanned the darkness. The symbols on the ground felt alive, and I remembered the warning, the map. "We have to stick together," I urged, grabbing her arm again. We began to walk cautiously, stepping over twisted roots and uneven ground. Each sound sent chills down my spine, the rustle of leaves, the distant snaps of twigs. My flashlight flickered, and the shadows stretched and lurked just beyond our vision. "Look!" Sarah pointed to an area off the path, illuminated faintly by the plants. A small cave sat nestled between the roots of a massive tree, almost hidden. "Should we go in there?" "A cave?" I hesitated, glancing back at the swirling darkness behind us. The growl echoed again, closer this time. "We don't have a choice. We'll have to." We rushed toward it, heartbeats racing. The entrance was narrow, but we squeezed in. Inside, the air was cooler, and the walls were slick with moisture. The faint glow outside dimmed as we pressed deeper, and soon we were enveloped in darkness again, save for the soft glow emanating from the walls. "Do you hear that?" Sarah whispered. I strained to listen, heart racing. There was a low, rhythmic sound, almost like chanting. I felt a shiver crawl down my spine. "Maybe it's people," I suggested, but my voice faltered. I didn't want to believe it could be anything but benign. As we inched forward, where the walls met at a bend, our flashlight flickered and then died, plunging us into total darkness. "Great," I muttered. "Now what?" "Maybe we should turn back," Sarah said, panic returning to her voice. Just as she spoke, the chanting grew louder, more urgent. That's when I felt it. Something was there, watching us from the shadows, breathing heavily. A cold dread settled in my stomach as I had a horrible realization. It wasn't the woods that were haunted. It was us. Before I could react, something cold gripped my arm, pulling me into the darkness. The chanting crescendoed, matching my racing heart. I screamed for Sarah, but only silence answered back. Then everything went dark again. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't sure how much time had passed. I was lying on a hard surface, and the air felt stale and cold. Slowly, I pushed myself up, feeling a sharp pain in my shoulder. As I shook my head to clear the fog, I took in my surroundings. I was in the cave. But it felt different now. The glowing plants had vanished, and I could see nothing but shadowy outlines. I was alone. "Sarah!" I called out, my voice echoing against the walls. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt a wave of panic rise in my chest. Had she been taken? The thought sent chills coursing through me. I crawled on hands and knees, desperate to find her. As I moved deeper into the cave, I noticed strange markings glimmering faintly on the walls. They resembled the symbols I had seen in the woods. "What does this mean?" I muttered to myself, trying to focus on anything other than the growing fear of what might be lurking in the shadows. A sudden thump reverberated through the cave, making me freeze. I held my breath. The sound was too close. My heart raced as I pressed against the wall, trying to blend into the darkness. Then, slowly, something shifted in the shadows. There it was again, the low growl I had heard earlier. My pulse quickened. I had to move. I tried to quiet my breathing as I inched backwards, but the wet ground slipped beneath me, and I fell hard. The noise echoed off the cave walls, and in that moment, the chanting returned, a chilling reminder of how close I was to danger. "Sarah!" I shouted again, louder this time, hoping she would hear me. But then, from the darkness, a figure emerged. It was a silhouette at first, but as it stepped closer, I could see its features. It had gaunt cheeks, hollow eyes that glimmered faintly in the darkness, and its mouth stretched into a twisted smile. "Welcome," it whispered, the voice like gravel scraping against stone. I scrambled backward, my instincts screaming at me to run. "Stay away from me!" I yelled. But my voice trembled, revealing my terror. The creature paused, tilting its head as if it were contemplating my words. "Where is she?" I demanded, my voice cracking. "What do you want?" A sinister laugh echoed through the cave. "We don't want anything from you. But she is part of this place now." A sharp pain shot through me as I realized the implications of that statement. "No!" I shouted. "Let her go." The figure moved closer, its breath cold against my skin. Just then, another sound joined the chanting, a soft whimper that made my blood run cold. It was Sarah. "Sarah!" I cried, my heart racing. The creature lunged, and I barely dodged, scrambling to my feet. I saw a faint light ahead. I had to reach it. I turned and ran, the echoes of the cave and its haunting voices surrounding me. I could hear Sarah's distant cries, and that only fueled my panic. Just as I thought I might escape, that same cold grip clamped around my ankle, pulling me down. I fell hard, my scream swallowed by darkness once more. Then everything went dark again. I jolted awake on the damp floor of the cave, my body aching. An oppressive silence filled the space, and I struggled to regain my bearings. I was still alone, but I felt a heavy weight in the air. My heart was pounding as I pushed myself up. I knew I had to keep moving, but the darkness was disorienting. "Sarah!" I called out again, more desperate this time. There was nothing but stillness, and that eerie echo wrapping around me made it worse. I took a shaky breath and forced myself to stand. I grabbed hold of the wall, trying to find my way back to the faint light I had seen last. I stumbled forward, feeling the contours of the cave, brushing against the strange markings. They seemed to pulse faintly, and I felt a chill race down my spine. I glanced back over my shoulder, half expecting the twisted figure to be looming just beyond my vision. Then I heard it again, the growl, deep and menacing. My stomach dropped. This time, it seemed to come from multiple directions, reverberating like a chorus of nightmares. Panic surged. I had to get out. Pressing on, I tightened my grip against the wall and moved faster. Shadows flickered at the edge of my vision, and every rustle sent my heart racing. I tripped again, this time falling hard onto my hands and knees, the cold, wet ground splattering against my skin. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to not let the fear take over. Suddenly, a scrape echoed nearby. I froze. It was followed by soft, muffled voices whispering in a language I didn't understand. I strained to listen, my heart racing as I pushed back against the wall, praying that whatever was creeping closer wouldn't see me. The whispers grew in intensity. It sounded like a chant, but it was almost melodic, as if it were trying to soothe someone. I felt a strange pull toward it, but the fear held me rooted in place. I couldn't help but feel that I was at the center of something I couldn't comprehend. Then, out of the shadows, another figure emerged. This one was smaller, hunched over, dragging something behind it. My breath caught as I realized it was a ragged piece of clothing, Sarah's shirt. "Sarah!" I screamed, rising to my feet with renewed energy. "Get away from her!" The creature halted, glancing at me with its beady eyes. There was no smile on its face, only a mix of confusion and something darker. I took a step forward, trembling as adrenaline surged through me. In that moment, I saw something glittering in the darkness behind it. It was a piece of fabric, shimmering faintly the same symbols I'd seen along the cave walls. Could these markings be the reason for our entrapment? Was she part of this somehow? The creature hissed, the sound chilling me to the bone. It darted back into the shadows, pulling the fabric with it. My heart raced as I swallowed hard, sensing that the chanting had intensified, closing in like a suffocating blanket. Sarah! I called again, choking on fear. The silence that followed felt ominous. Something was not right. I took one step back, and suddenly everything went dark around me, plunging me into absolute blackness. What else was lurking in this cave? I had to find Sarah before it was too late. I blinked into the darkness, my heart still racing. The silence told me everything had stopped: the chanting, the whispers, even the growls that had haunted me. It was like the cave had swallowed all sound, leaving just my echoing breath. I felt a sense of dread building again, the kind that grips you and doesn't let go. I stood still, listening for any sign of life or movement around me. My fingers traced the wet walls, guiding me cautiously as I struggled to regain my bearings. I wanted to scream for Sarah again, but the fear of what might answer held me back. Think, just think, I whispered to myself. I had to be logical. Panic would only lead me further into the dark. I focused instead on those strange symbols I had seen earlier. They had felt alive, almost electric. Could they help me communicate with whatever was in this cave? I took a deep breath, bracing myself. I needed to find anything familiar, something that could anchor me to reality. I moved slowly, my hands out in front of me. The cave felt impossibly wide, and it twisted in unexpected ways. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, but I forced myself not to turn. I had to keep going. Then, I stumbled onto something slick and cold beneath my feet. I lost my balance and raised my hands to catch myself against the rough wall. A soft splash echoed around me. My heart sank as I realized I had stepped into a shallow pool. The water mirrored the darkness, and I tried to shake off the feeling of something lurking beneath the surface. I started to step back, but then a flicker of light caught my eye. I turned instinctively towards it. It flickered like a candle, swaying gently. Tentatively, I moved toward the glow. Each step felt like dragging my feet through sand, the weight of anxiety pulling me down. What if it was a trap? As I reached the narrow passage, the light grew more distinct. It illuminated a small alcove. Inside, I found a crude gathering of rocks and twigs shaped in a way that looked far too intentional. In the center of this makeshift altar sat a small flame, flickering boldly in defiance of the oppressive darkness. What startled me most were the offerings surrounding the flame, a collection of fabrics and jewelry that looked familiar. As I squinted closer, I recognized Sarah's necklace tangled beside a worn-out piece of her clothing. "Sarah?" I called, my voice trembling now with a mix of hope and dread. I knelt next to the altar, my hands shaking as I reached for the necklace. The moment my fingers brushed against it, the flame flared violently and the cave filled with a cacophony of whispers. They rushed forward, almost overwhelming me. "Get out!" Someone screamed amid the chaos, a voice that was both familiar and warped, echoing deeply in the shadows. My heart stopped. Just as swiftly, the flame winked out, plunging me back into darkness. The whispers faded, but the urgency rang in my ears. I had to escape, but my chance to find Sarah was slipping away. As I stumbled back, I heard a low growl echoing from the passage behind me. It was close, too close. Whatever was lurking was no longer hiding. I pushed myself to my feet, the cold sweat of fear soaking my skin. The growl reverberated again, a bone-deep reminder that time was running out. I stumbled away from the altar, my heart pounding louder than the growl that crept ever closer. I had to find Sarah, but a part of me whispered that I should just run. I forced my feet to move, searching desperately for any sign of a way out. The cavern felt like a maze, twisting and turning with unexpected paths jutting off into darkness. As I moved, I could feel the weight of unseen eyes tracking my every move. The legends I had heard around campfires echoed in my mind how people went missing in these woods, drawn to whatever lurked just beyond the edge of sanity. With every step deeper into the cave, the whispers crescendoed, overlapping and filling the air with an urgent cry that tugged at my heart. It was as though the very cave was trying to communicate with me, trying to warn me away from the danger lurking in its depths. But the desire to find Sarah, the thought of leaving her behind, overpowered the instinct screaming at me to flee. "I'm coming, Sarah!" I shouted, my voice swallowed by the darkness. My throat burned with the effort, but I couldn't stop. I pressed on, stumbling over roots and stones scattered across the damp ground. I could feel the darkness shifting, as if it were closing in. It was a living thing, hungry and merciless, and I was its prey. Then I stopped. A flicker of movement caught my eye there. In the darkest corner of the cave. I strained to see, my breath catching in my throat. It was Sarah. But she was kneeling on the ground, her arms outstretched as if she were reaching for something just beyond her grasp. I took a cautious step forward, calling out her name softly. "Sarah." Her head turned slightly, and for a heartbeat, I saw her eyes wide, but clouded, as if they were trapped in a trance. "Jess," she whispered, her voice barely above a murmur, I can't leave." "Leave what?" I pressed, my heart racing. My feet moved instinctively toward her, but an instinctual urge kept me at bay. What was holding her here? "The forest, it needs us," she said, her voice distant. "We belong to it now." The weight of her words crushed down upon me, feeding my dread. She wasn't fully with me, she was losing herself. "Sarah, we need to get out," I insisted, fighting against the consuming darkness and the fear that gripped my heart. "Please." In that moment, a deafening roar echoed through the cave, a sound that reverberated deep within my bones. It came from behind me. Something massive was approaching. "Run!" I screamed, panic flaring as the growl turned into a full-throated snarl. I reached for her, desperate, but she remained rooted in place. "Don't go," Sarah pleaded, but I couldn't wait. Focusing on a passage to my left, I turned and sprinted into the darkness, the shadows closing in behind me like a curtain of despair. As I fled, I didn't dare look back. I could feel the rush of air as whatever hunted me surged forward, but the whispers erupted again, ringing in my ears, muting the growl. Everything blurred, a cacophony of sounds that chased after me like a wailing banshee. I stumbled, catching my breath, feeling the cold grip of fear trying to pull me back. But then, to my relief, I saw a faint glimmer of light breaking through the thick darkness ahead. Hope surged in my chest. I pushed myself harder, propelled by adrenaline. The glow grew brighter, illuminating the entrance of the cave. Freedom was so close. I darted forward, but just as I broke into that light, the ground beneath me gave way again. Falling into a chasm felt like the final plunge into despair. I braced myself, but instead of impact, I landed softly on grass. A miracle of forest floor. The night sky stretched above me, full of stars. I blinked in disbelief as I rolled to my feet. But then the air shifted, and that feeling of being watched returned. I spun back to the cave entrance, heart racing, breath caught in my throat. Sarah. I couldn't leave her. Driven by fear and urgency, I made a desperate attempt to return, but the shadows swirled around me, enveloping me with their cold grasp. I felt the forest almost whispering to me now, as if it were pleading for me to stay. But I couldn't. Sarah. I cried out, the name tearing from my throat in desperation. The dark rim of the cave loomed ahead, beckoning with malevolence. I could hear her whispers mingling with the forest's lullaby. And then I saw it, a figure standing just at the cave entrance, flickered with darkness and light, a twisted, elongated silhouette that sent chills racing up my spine. The smell of earth and decay clung to the air. I turned to flee, breath hitching as I faced the darkened woods. As I stumbled away, I could feel the weight of my decision sink in. Would I ever know the truth? Had I escaped whatever was hunting me? The forest enveloped me like a shroud, the shadows reaching out as I ran, but deep inside, I knew I would never escape the memories. Not completely. There would always be whispers, echoes of what existed in those woods. And though I was out, and though the danger seemed to lie behind me, a haunting sense of loss clung to me. As I ran into the depths of the night, I couldn't help but wonder if Sarah was still there, still part of whatever curse lingered in the trees. I reached the edge of the woods, breathless and trembling. The air felt heavy, like it was holding its breath, waiting for me to leave. As I stepped into the clearing, my heartbeat started to slow. I had escaped, but something unsettled lingered in the back of my mind. There I stood, uncertain whether I was truly free or whether the darkness would follow, weaving itself into the fabric of my very being. I cast one last glance back at the forest, shadows slipping through the trees like ethereal wraiths, and felt a cold shiver dance along my spine. I moved on, but I never returned. Weeks turned into months, and though I often thought of those woods, part of me felt tethered to that dark place. Did the whispers still call for me? Did the forest still hold her? There would always be questions without answers, mysteries draped in shadows, and echoes that would chase me long after the night. I had left the woods, yes, but I knew in my heart that the woods had left something behind in me, something I could never completely escape.